Okay, this is the second broadcast for the year 2026 from Quackaholics Anonymous on this day of January the 9th, 2026. Normally, this is a bi-weekly type of event, but this week I had downtime on my hands, and not good downtime either. What I'm currently doing is waiting for the phone to ring and the mechanic to tell me how much money I got to pay him. I got a pretty good car. It's a 2015 Toyota Avalon Limited, one of the last limiteds, and yeah, excellent car, got no complaints, but when something does break on the thing, it tends to be pretty expensive. So while I'm waiting, I just thought I'd do a weekly broadcast this time around rather than waiting for 2 weeks. Why not? Because I already had my notes compiled and was ready to talk about this. And of course, as always, before I ever get started, I want to give a shout out to, and I'm never exactly sure how to phrase this exactly. Like, do I say other anti-AA content creators, or do I say, uh, do I say alternatives to AA content creators? What would I exactly word that as? And the best thing that I can come up with off the top of my head was other content creators who are critical of the 12-step programs of AA. Well, not just of AA, 12-step programs. There, keep it short and sweet. Sobriety Bestie, I'm trying to get I know she's doing live stuff now with Burn the Stigma. I'm trying to get some downtime so we can do a live fairly soon, hopefully, because I want to address what I've talked about in the last two videos, all the stupid troll comments. I kind of want to break it all down to what, because there's only like 10 or 12 comments that you're going to get from pro AA people. And we've all heard them on here a million times before, and you heard them in meetings. You didn't want it bad enough, you weren't honest, you probably didn't have a sponsor, you're not maybe an alcoholic, you didn't give it a chance, whatever. But there's only like 10 to 12 all total. Over the years that I've been doing this, it's usually, you can reword it a little bit, you can throw a few ugly, stupid assertions into it, but it's ultimately about the same 9-10 arguments. And I thought we could do a live talking about the AA trolls and morons and stuff like that. I know my voice sounds a little bit off, but the weather. I mean, we've had kind of capricious weather the past few days. It doesn't know what it wants to do. You can sometimes experience all four seasons in a day, with some of these unsettled weather patterns that have been happening lately. But anyway, Sobriety Bestie, my first content creator shout out, Burn the Stigma. They're doing live shows together now. I forgot the day of the week you could catch them on, but it's generally, and it's a live interaction where you interact with live comments and all that other good stuff. Emma's Groupthink podcast. The Tegan Osmond channel, which talks about malignant narcissists and the kind of manipulation and tactics that they use. Thrive Alcohol Recovery with Katie about the Sinclair method. There's Those Who Could Not or Would Not. I still love the name of that channel. I haven't actually checked on the recent content there. There's Contempt After Investigation. There's the Anti-AA Concept. And a few others I don't actually... I'm glancing down at this piece of paper, and it's actually just notes. I'm not actually reading the content creators' names off. I'm doing it all in my head. There's a few books on there, one by Joyce, Dee Dee Stout, and some others in the video description. But anyway, the last time I did a video, I was talking about the pseudo-self with Eric Fromm, and I'm going to bring in another individual for this go-around as well, because it's going to kind of address something that someone had brought up in the comment sections, not in an arguing comment section like normally happens when Sobriety Bestie or Burn the Stigma post on Facebook. It was actually in a discussion between ex-AA members where someone was talking about the people that they noticed that were still taking the program actually seriously, who had the double decades when they were in AA, were almost every single one of them was quite unhinged. And I got to thinking about that, because you did have a lot of unhinged old-timers, the ones that were really taking it seriously, the ones that actually seemed to believe in it, versus the more dominant ones I noticed, who were the ones that really didn't seem to believe anything. They knew what to say in the meetings. They knew the right lines to say and everything like that, but they were kind of angry, vindictive people, not to mention kind of empty people. There was nobody that I knew that, had this double-digit years in there that was in meetings, 2 and 3 times a day, that there wasn't something off about them, to be honest. Now, I know personal experience does not count as evidence, but when they made the comment about every single person they knew that was really, really into the book and all of that, every single one of them was unhinged, it got me to thinking about all the people I met in AA with the double-digit years. And I'm not talking about every single person with double-digit years, by the way. And oftentimes when I'm talking about AA members, I'm not talking about regular members or the people who had 20 years in the program and walked away from it, or I'm talking about mainly the gurus in my videos. I'm talking about that little hierarchy that controls every home group. I'm talking about the people that are treated like the respected elders that are called on every meeting and everybody nods their head vigorously at their shares. I'm talking about those specific AA members. I'm not talking about a guy who's just been going to meetings for 20 years, or I'm not really talking about, I went to meetings 11 years. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more about the ones who seem to enjoy a special type of status and privilege in AA. They got 1 million sponsees. They're called on every meeting. Some of them want to put on the street guy persona. They got a leather-bound big book that they keep in a saddlebag on the side of their really expensive Harley Davidson when they're pretending to be 1% motorcycle club members or something like that, or the guys that want to look like street thugs that have the Serenity Prayer tattoo right here, or something like Just for the Day on these both sides, and they got the big book bound in one of these leather-bound looking things, and they got their hats around backwards about like I do here, and every share kind of is like this. I'm not the performances, those kinds of people who their whole entire heart and soul seems to be tied up into the fucking program. I could keep going with the different types. I mean, because I did a video one time on the types of shares, but I think you get the general idea. The people who control AA, more or less. And I was thinking about how all of those types of people, they either were utter hypocrites, or they were kind of angry, miserable, kind of petty people, or they were, a lot of them were downright nefarious type people. They were scheming and predators and everything else. But it did occur to me that almost none of them had anything going for them in life other than that performance in their AA meetings when they got called on, when they got to, do their little thing, or when they were preaching to their sponsees and treating them like dirt, or when they were doing AA performances, for the most part. But it kind of actually tied into another thing that occurred to me is, why did I keep going to AA for as long as I did? Because I know for about I'm going to say the last 5 years is when I really, really started to get hostile towards it. I was kind of just confused and on the fence and trying to find a solution during the first 3 or 4 years, and gradually, slowly but surely. But yeah, for 5 straight years, I went to AA despising it. And we're not counting when I was court-ordered into it, but despised it with a passion, and yet I just kept going. And then I knew other guys that were kind of in my boat that were a lot like me. We were always picking up white chips. We were always relapsing. Nobody ever really paid us any attention any longer unless they were going to berate us, or unless they were interrogating us, or, it's almost like a scripted performance that you don't even realize you're in until you look back on it. They're supposed to come up to you, look like this at you, and say, "And how are you doing?" And you're supposed to say, "No, I'm good. I'm pretty good. I'm having a pretty good." Pretty good? Are you really going to tell me the truth? Or, if you say something like fine, they say, "You mean fucked up, insecure, and neurotic, and all that," all that bullshit. You're supposed to be bowing and scraping around the esteemed holy rollers that run the entire toxic environment. But why did we keep going? I mean, there's no way that I thought there was some kind of magical solution in this. There was no reason for me to continue to do this. And it wasn't because, like the girl in the Breakfast Club saying I just had nothing better to do today. I mean, there was some pull that kept putting me back into it, like swapping one addiction for another. Except it's not quite the same thing, because even when I was hopelessly addicted to alcohol, at least I did get, it kind of did what I was expecting it to do. It may have made me do some terrible things with really bad judgment when I was heavily under the influence, but it numbed out reality. AA meetings did not. They made me more angry, more depressed, more upset. I already hear the old timer in the comments right now who's going to pop up. No, well, I don't know what meetings you went to. I've never seen anything like what you're talking about. I've watched your videos. I've just never seen anything like this. Yeah. Heard it all before. But why do we keep going? And I thought about tying that in with, the last time I did a video, it was about Eric Fromm and the pseudo-self. But I never really looked at behavior until I started, and it's been a while since I read these ideas about behaviorism, but I never really thought about how I would tie it into this channel, because it's something that's kind of lurked in the back of my mind for a very long time, and I've never known quite how to articulate it. But the answer might be found in a guy named B.F. Skinner, and he's the guy that we're going to bring in tonight today on this. I said tonight, but it's late afternoon. I guess we could say tonight. But it was behavior is shaped by consequences. As a matter of fact, who he was a 20th century American psychologist and the main proponent of a theory called behaviorism. The idea that human behavior is shaped less by our inner thoughts and free will, or even our unconscious drives, and more by consequences that follow actions. Yeah, in other words, a lot of the decisions we make might not necessarily be out of our desires to make those decisions, and is not necessarily by some subconscious thing like that. Like I had an AA old timer one time told me, well, the reason you probably got drunk and you don't even realize it is because you were trying to self-sabotage your progress. And I was like, no, that's not why I got drunk. I got drunk because I wanted to get drunk, But anyway, he was saying that behavior is more motivated by what goes on externally than internally, kind of. And he argued that behavior follows lawful, observable patterns. And he developed the concept, can't talk right now, of operant conditioning, showing that organisms, including humans, learn to repeat behaviors that are rewarded and stop behaviors that are not. Well, when I was first looking at this, looking through notes and ideas for this, I thought, yeah, but what happens when you're doing things that you don't really like at all, like hating AA and being compelled to go there every night, like by forces unseen or some shit? So he built experimental systems like the Skinner box to measure how variables such as timing, frequency, and types of reinforcement shape behavior over time. And he believed that many things we treat as moral characters or personalities or even choices are actually the result of environmental conditioning histories. This led him to challenge ideas about personal blame and praise and punishment, proposing instead that society should be designed to reinforce healthier, more cooperative behaviors. Well, that depends on your point of view about that. A view that's made him both influential and controversial. I'm not saying what he, anytime I bring in a guy on here, a historical person or whoever, I almost always feel like I have to throw in the disclaimer of, I'm not saying that because he put forth this theory that that's the way it is. I'm not saying that because Plato said something, that's the way it is. I'm not saying that anybody that you've heard me talk about in previous videos, just because they say something, I'm not doing a Bill W here. I'm not saying that we should necessarily agree with who I bring in, but I'm saying it's food for thought. Because if you think about some of these ideas and you bounce them around, you kind of get the idea of, well, maybe there is something to this. That's really what I'm doing when I bring in these people. It's not an argument from authority. I'm not doing a Bill W said it, so it must be true. So now I'm going to say B.F. Skinner said it, so it must be true. It's not like that. It's just to give you a background, to kind of articulate what I think is wrong with AA, and then the rest of it is up to you. Do you think this is bullshit, or does it kind of does it resonate? But he reframed humans not as autonomous moral agents in the traditional sense, but as adapted biological systems shaped continuously by their environments. Now, his core claim is pretty straightforward. We're not going to go into the entire body of his work here, but behavior is shaped, like I just said, by consequences, and he named 4 basic contingencies to shape behavior: positive reinforcement, something good to increase the behavior; negative reinforcement, remove something bad to increase a behavior; positive punishment, add something unpleasant to decrease a behavior; negative punishment, remove something valued to decrease a behavior. Now, I know that's going to sound really like a clusterfuck of confusion, but it's a lot more simpler than you realize. These are just tools: positive, negative, enforcements. And pretty much almost all social systems use them, regardless of the social system. Whether they do it consciously or not is up for debate. But AA uses all of this, all 4 of these, and they use them constantly. When you understand the tools, you can see how the rooms actually trains people to doing things even when they don't want to do it, or to continue perpetuating this little, like, the hamster running on the wheel kind of thing. You don't even realize you're on a wheel that you can't get out of. And I had to grab another note. And this behavior, wait, I actually dropped the note. This behavior is apparent. Well, one second. Okay, I lost my place. You should see the clusterfuck that's these notes. Anyway, every social system uses these trained behaviors to more or less enforce unspoken rules. We're talking a little bit different than what I said about the panopticon and some other, things like that. Really and truly, the human condition is a whole big, gigantic jigsaw puzzle of mysteries, and we get little pieces here and there, and we try to connect them and see if they fit. But positive reinforcement is one of the most visible things that happens in AA right from the get-go. You say the right thing in the meeting, you're going to get rewarded. You're going to get rewarded with applause, especially if you're picking up a medallion, or if you're getting chips for time earned, or even the little walk of shame. I did millions of them where you're going to get that white chip. Everybody's clapping, but there's kind of a negative reinforcement going on there. You're kind of like, oh, I failed again. Thank you people for forgiving me and accepting me back. That kind of humiliation ritual. You get nods when you talk. I've talked on here before about the vigorous head nodding. And you get congratulations. You get invitations to speak if you can say all the right things really good. Like if you're a new guy with about 60, 70 days and they want you to go to a treatment center and speak, and then you get to come to the meeting and you get to brag about, I spoke to a treatment center and I was just truly honored and humbled to do that. And there were all these men coming up to me after the thing and they said, you saved my life tonight. And they actually did say that. It's bullshit. But you realize that that's your system of rewards. The big book supplies the language, the slogans, the phrases, and the script. That's what you're supposed to follow. That's the rule book. That's the guide to acting and performing in this new trained mode of behavior. One lines of many that's learned early on is stuff like, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Say the line and the room nods. When I got to AA, I just read that one step like it was nothing, and it took me some time before I had to realize that I admit that I'm powerless over alcohol, and everybody's like, like that. That nod is a reward. Skinner would say, repeat the line, repeat the behavior. In other words, keep doing shit like that and you'll keep getting that kind of reward. Although a nod and a bunch of people going, not much of a reward if you ask me. But over time, this kind of little behavior, this doing that, if I say these lines, the people love it. If I say these lines, the people laugh. If I say these lines, the sponsors clap me on the back and they acknowledge you're really trying, or something like that. What happens is over time, the performance just becomes a completely ingrained habit. You speak the script before you even feel the feeling, according to Mr. B.F. Skinner. Now, negative reinforcement works by removing discomfort. Confession in AA often brings immediate relief. You say something shameful, and the room all laughs and nods. Yeah, we're one of you. We've all been there. We've all done that kind of thing, and the shame lifts. I used to steal. I used to steal a lot. I stole all this money, and I blew it all on alcohol and drugs, and I caused someone to lose their home as a result of all my stealing. Everybody, yeah, we've all been there. You don't feel ashamed over confessing your shit anymore. And sometimes I used to think half of those tearful confession sob stories in AA was just made up acting. Just bullshit. I got to make up a sob story so I can get some nods tonight. But you learn. The more I confess what a garbage human being I am, the better I get to feel. And the more I will be praised by the crowd and welcomed. So you confess more. Probably what leads people to make up all these phony fucking stories because they're hoping for that type of attention. The room begins to reduce your anxiety, and so you keep returning. This is not moralizing, it's behavior economics. Relief is a powerful currency. You got something on your mind and you tell it in front of a room full of strangers and they all nod and smile and all of that stuff, in this subtle way of programming, and it becomes a really powerful thing to seek. It's almost, it's an addiction with an addiction. But it's more than that. You're being trained. You're being programmed. Just like in a lot of phony online discussions, you see these people that they all know the right things to say. They all know what's the right things to do. Like the people that'll, you obviously had a resentment. This is a wonderful organization. It saved so many people. It saved my life when I was a homeless bum. And to see you trash and demean this organization, yeah. You got all the right lines. Who's gonna, you're gonna get a bunch of likes for that. You're gonna get a bunch of heart reacts for that. There's a bunch of AA people that's gonna jump in with you. It's performance. Now, positive punishment. That sounds really bizarre, but positive punishment that he talked about adds an unpleasantness to reduce behavior. Question the program, and all of a sudden the room doesn't nod. In fact, the room doesn't laugh. And I've seen them actually. I swear to God, I don't know if it's subconscious or not, but I have seen someone say something genuinely funny in an AA meeting before. And because he wasn't popular, because he wasn't a guru or she or whoever, because they weren't popular or a guru or whoever, nobody would laugh. Nobody would even crack a smile. Nobody would do anything. I saw a few people actually tell a pretty funny story. And if I chuckled, it was almost like everybody was frowning and staring at their shoes. They want to hear the gurus speak. But it was cold shoulder, okay? But if someone says something in a share that is not going along with the rule books here, the guide, the programming, you get some unpleasantness. You may be corrected publicly. You ever seen someone talk in a meeting and the next four people attack them indirectly? And then they do the passive-aggressive bullshit and say, well, I didn't mention anybody's names, you get told you're in denial. You might be confronted in a way that feels like shaming. I remember being sometimes scolded by these AA people, and looking back on it now, it's mystifying. I should have looked at him and said, hey, I'm not a fucking little kindergartner that forgot to hang his jacket in the cloakroom and is not going to get to go to recess. You don't get to fucking talk to me like this. But you get scolded. And the little social sting reduces the likelihood that you'll do those kinds of things again if you want to continue being a member of AA, if you want to consider being one of us, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it. That little uncomfortable feeling of insecurity that they like to stick you with, it'll keep you from doing it again. Now, punishment may suppress your behavior, but it doesn't teach you anything. It doesn't show you any alternatives. So people just stop asking. People stop saying things that are not approved. People stop behaving in ways that the AA group might not like. Although old-timers get a pass for everything. I've seen so many angry, vile, vicious old-timers in meetings that would do every kind of thing and then would still talk about how spiritual they were. But if you're early on in it and you get exposed to that type of negative reaction, you're just going to simply stop doing it because this is the only place you got. This is the last house on the block. Which every time they said that, I used to think of that horror movie, The Last House on the Left, the old Wes Craven one. Now, this is the most important behavioral pattern in B.F. Skinner's ideas of behaviorism coming up. Intermittent reinforcement. And this is the schedule that makes the behavior actually most persistent. Because it's a funny thing. It was like the last video I had when I was talking about Festinger a couple of videos ago, where in order for a doomsday cult to get really fanatical followers, the doomsday cult literally has to make a prediction, and the prediction has to be wrong. Not right, but wrong. And that's what makes cult members dig in even more. So this is going to sound really strange, but intermittent reinforcement is actually the one that drives it home the most, even though you would think that it would do the opposite. You would think, well, wait a minute, sometimes I get good results. Sometimes I'm getting cold shoulders here. Sometimes I'm getting this. Sometimes I'm getting that. What the fuck? I'm just out of here. It actually doesn't do that. It has the opposite effect. It makes you more fanatical. Think of slot machines, for example. If you go to Atlantic City or you go to Las Vegas or wherever, you don't win every single pull. You win with unpredictability. You pull 4 or 5 bad ones, you might get a little small payout and a few more and all that. You know how that goes. Same thing with a card game. Okay, you win unpredictably. That unpredictability makes you keep playing. AA kind of delivers the intermittent rewards too. Intermittent. Oh, God. What's wrong with me today? You see, you get occasional breakthroughs. You get surprise affirmations, emotional highs, moments of deep connection. But they're not constant. Sometimes you might say the wrong thing in a meeting and everybody immediately stops laughing, stops nodding, stops giving you the attention that you were expecting. And then that throws you off your guard. The variable ratio schedule is kind of the hardest to extinguish because, well, I said all the right things tonight. Nobody reacted. Nobody even laughed. Nobody even applauded. Nobody even nodded. Nobody even came to me after the meeting and said, what a great thing I did. Then 2 nights ago, they were doing it. What the fuck is going on here? You see, even if most of the meetings that you're in fall flat and they become boring and dull and monotonous, the memory of the last powerful meeting on some level pulls you back. Just like if you have 2 or 3 really shitty meetings, but then you have that one good meeting, that one meeting where you get called on and everybody laughs and applauds and nods or something. It's like the slot machine. You're going to be chasing the next unpredictable high, just like a gambler. Or just like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football out from underneath Lucy, only Lucy sometimes lets him kick it and sometimes pulls it up. It explains why people return after leaving. They're still chasing it. People often say, if you don't like AA, just leave. Skinner, along with the other guys I've been talking about on here lately, shows why that's really not that simple, because leaving means losing your social circle, your benefits, your rewards, your identity. It means losing your routine, losing your source of praise. On top of that, the group narrative often punishes leaving with a lot of fear, because you're now stepping into a world that will not reinforce the same behaviors. You can't go into your job and talk about self-will run riot. You can, but I mean, you're not going to get the same laughs and the claps. There's nobody on some fucking job somewhere when you say, today I was about self-will run riot, that's going to go, no, not going to happen. But now the group is also telling you, leave and you'll drink, leave and you'll die. There is no other choice. Go to the bitter end, blotting out the the intolerableness of your existence, or accept spiritual help, jails, institutions, and death. This is an appeal to fear. It functions as a behavioral punishment by threat. When the environment punishes exit and rewards staying, leaving becomes a high-cost risk behavior. It's not a free choice any longer. It's learned avoidance. You've learned it over time. Why do some old-timers seem to have nothing outside the rooms? Because their entire reinforcement history of validation is inside the rooms. If the only reliable rewards in your life, if the only pleasant things in your entire existence comes from meetings and chips and sponsor approval and the audience laughing at your shares, you're going to stop investing anything in the outside world, any kind of outside net at all. Hobbies, careers, friendships outside the program, they're all going to go by the wayside. The outside world offers no immediate rewards for the same behaviors. Go into a grocery store and tell everybody, I hadn't had a drink in 30 years, and the last time I had a drink, I got 6 DUIs in one night. Everybody kind of looks at you like, and then just keeps going. Their behavior's been shaped to expect nothing but reinforcement inside the rooms, so the outside world feels like a empty, isolated, stranger in a strange land, T.S. Eliot's The Wastelands, and all that shit, all in one. And it's a predictable outcome of reinforcement economy. Reality, facts, logic, and critical thought threaten that delusion for them. They threaten their safe reinforcement fantasy. And if you notice, a lot of AA old-timers are almost terrified of losing status. That's why a lot of them probably don't own up to it if they slip or they relapse or they fall or whatever. Their whole reason for resistance is the constant high of their own self-importance. It's a new addiction, but it's a trained addiction. Punishment suppresses behavior, but it doesn't teach alternatives. When questioning is punished, people are going to stop questioning. That creates a stagnation. It kills neuroplasticity. The group loses the capacity to self-correct if something like that is going on, because instead of testing claims against evidence, the culture is just policing language, policing loyalty, making sure you're saying all the right things, making sure you're not reading outside the approved literature. This policing inside the community itself of AA is a behavior control mechanism, and it calls itself moral and spiritual when it's anything but. This is literally just a made-up society with made-up rules, where stepping outside of the made-up rules, you're told you're going to die for it when it's not based in any reality at all. It's just behavioral control. And like I said earlier in the video, the big book supplies all the language you need and all the rituals you need, the 12 steps, and the stories and prescriptions become what you're supposed to behave like, what you're supposed to act like, how you're supposed to perform. Lines about surrender and reliance on a higher power are repeated in meetings over and over. One line that many learn early is about saying they're powerless over alcohol, saying that you can't fix a broken thinker with a broken thinker. All those lines functions as cues as to how you're supposed to behave. Say it and the room responds. And the literature provides all the verbal tokens that the reinforcement system rewards. A lot of the times, the meetings are the same thing. They're just kind of regurgitating it in a different sentence or something like that. And when text and ritual and social reinforcement align, behavior becomes highly, highly predictable. Behavioral systems are often defended with a lot of angry rhetoric. Several fallacies are often common, like the false dilemma, don't like AA, don't go, ignores the cost of leaving, leave and you'll die, substitutes threats for evidence. Failures are reclassified as not working the program, insulating the program, or you're not a real alcoholic, another no true Scotsman. And these fallacies that they all commit in these comment sections and in meetings and all that other kind of thing, they function as kind of like rhetorical punishments. They silence doubt and preserve reinforcement patterns. And when language blocks inquiry, behavior remains unexamined. How are you going to do an actual inventory of your own life if it's only through a strict, dogmatic, puritanical lens, through the twisted mind of Bill W.? That's not an actual inventory. That's one man's twisted idea of what you're supposed to look like, and you trying to fit it. And therefore, you don't ever get to examine anything. You just know what rewards to put. It's kind of like the little toddler that knows the kindergartner that I mentioned earlier, if I hang my cloak up, if I hang my coat in the cloakroom, under the initial that has my name on it, and if I keep the coloring on my assignment in between the lines, the teacher will reward me and I'll get to go to recess. And if I don't do those things, I'll have to stay indoors and write on the chalkboard. It's literally all it is, just with the religious cult programmings and trappings, and it actually is very, very harmful. People lose their lives over this shit, and it's literally no different than that. I remember an old timer who used to say AA is a kindergarten for spirituality. No, what you're saying is AA is for a group of people with kindergarten mentalities going around claiming spirituality and professing themselves to be chosen by God while other people die with addiction problems. So, to back up from the last couple of videos I've done, how does Skinner fit with Festinger and Fromm? Festinger explains how beliefs survive contradiction. Fromm explains how identity is replaced by a pseudo-self, and Skinner here this week is explaining how behavior is just trained by consequences. Together they kind of form a disturbing picture. Beliefs are defended, selves are reshaped, behaviors are reinforced. Understanding all three kind of gives us a rich way to look at the situation. And when you look at the situation, and again, it's not just these three guys. I bring up people on these videos all the time, writers and theorists and philosophers and everyone else, and literature. It gives you an idea to think about something. It's food for thought. Come to think of it, it's embarrassing when I think about how many things I would say when called on. It was no more a part of my genuine self than anything. It was scripted behavior that I knew might get the approval of the room. And the room really becomes the higher power because the room is everything. I think there was a science fiction story named that, but I can't remember what it was. So anyway, before I get to my subscriber comment, because I think I'm about done here, AA shapes behavior because it controls rewards and punishments people experience. That explains why leaving is hard, why old-timers sometimes have nothing outside the rooms, and why the culture itself will resist change and cannot be reformed. This is not necessarily an indictment of the individuals in a situation like this, because Skinner believed the environment creates all this. It's a call to get rid of that environment. Recovery should kind of expand your life, no? Should expand your life and not shrink it to a single stage. What kind of happy, joyous life beyond your wildest dreams can you have if you're just performing it in one stage? And anyway, I think I've kind of said everything now at this point. So I'm going to read a subscriber comment that I think adds up with us a lot. It says, as someone who grew up with a drinker who wasn't able to do the normal developmental work of a child, developing a sense of self through play and exploration, I went into AA with no internal sense of self. I had the shaky identity I'd pulled together out of being a terrified, introverted child who read books and hid, the teen who got wrecked and smashed things up, and then the very young adult who was unsure who to be if both those versions of her did not amount to much. Actually, I can relate to that a lot. As a result, I was an empty vessel and a prime candidate for AA to shape and mold. My terrible teenager behavior longed to be redeemed, and I threw myself into becoming the model AA member and what I believed to be a good human being. I created a false self, and it worked. It worked as long as I did the right things. I didn't argue. I didn't step out of line. I banged the drum for AA. I was the perfect candidate for AA and one of its biggest advocates. Until after 25 years, I realized that I was still wanting people to approve of me. That somewhere deep down, I still felt like I was wrong in some way. This led me to an amazing trauma therapist who offered me enough safety for me to explore my actual self and to start to process the trauma, grief, and unmet needs of my childhood. As soon as I realized this, I dispensed with the idea of God, and as soon as that went, the whole house of cards fell. I stopped attending about 6 months ago. I could no longer sit there and look at all the poor, traumatized, or ADHD or autistic people who were never really getting better. Yes, not drinking, living ordinary lives, but not happy and still at the mercy of trauma-related behaviors. And in some way, I can't believe I spent so many years in AA, but from a trauma perspective, I think it makes total sense. I was the perfect candidate for it, as are so many others who have been developmentally stunted. I'm free now, and I'm working out my complex feelings about the whole thing, but I would never go back or suggest others to go there. So, that wraps it up for January 9th, 2026. Probably see you guys in a couple of weeks. Well, chime in on the comments and let me know what you think. I mean, I don't know if it was a Skinner experiment or not, where the pigeons could get fed if they turned their head a certain way. And he trained them, or a scientist trained them, and they would literally go to the thing and start doing their head like that, expecting their rewards and food. So yeah, maybe the Smashing Pumpkins back in the 90s was onto something about being a rat in a cage. Chime in on the comments and let me know what you think. See you guys next time.